We handle cases that oftentimes are historical. They've happened 40, 30 years ago. And some of them have had initial attempts at investigations. And so there may be files for those investigations that are thousands of pages long, and they're in Spanish or in Arabic we have to manage all of that with our small team.
Today on LawNext, how one legal tech company is donating its software in pursuit of justice for human rights crimes. Everlaw for Good is a program run by the e-discovery company Everlaw, through which it makes its software available at no cost to legal aid organizations, nonprofit organizations, and investigative journalists. One beneficiary of that program is the Center for Justice and Accountability, a human rights nonprofit that works to seek justice on behalf of victims of atrocity crimes, including torture, genocide, and war crimes. Recently at the Everlaw Summit, the CJA's work using the Everlaw platform was honored with the Everlaw for Good Award. I was at the summit, which was held in San Francisco in October, and I had the opportunity to sit down to record this conversation with two of the CJA's lawyers, along with the director of the Everlaw for Good program. My guests today are Claret Vargas, senior staff attorney at CJA, Daniel McLaughlin, also a senior staff attorney at CJA, and Joanne Sprague, the director of the Everlaw for Good program. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. Before we get to today's conversation, please take a moment to learn about the sponsors whose generosity helps keep this podcast going. Looking for law practice management software that actually understands your specialty? Meriscase is built specifically for workers' compensation, employment and labor, and insurance defense firms. With Meriscase, you'll get tailored features like intelligent document management, streamlined time tracking, integrated billing, and seamless payment reconciliation, all designed around how your firm works. Join the firms that have transformed their practice at Meriscase.com. That's MERUS case.com. I'm here at the Everlaw Summit. I'm here with three people who are involved with the Everlaw for Good program, two of them involved with a program that's benefited from the Everlaw for Good program, and one of whom is involved in overseeing the program. So we'll learn more about all of that in just a moment. But let me start by having three people I'm sitting here with introduce themselves, starting with Joanne Sprague, who's the head of the Everlaw for Good program. Joanne, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Joanne Sprague. I'm the director of our Everlaw for Good program here at Everlaw. I've been here for about 1 year, so this is my 1-year anniversary here at Summit, and I feel very privileged to direct this program, which provides free and discounted access to the Everlaw software to nonprofit organizations, pro bono matters, journalists, and educators.
All right. And Daniel McLaughlin.
Dan McLaughlin. I'm a lawyer and a senior staff attorney at the Center for Justice and Accountability.
All right. And Claret Vargas.
Hi, Claret Vargas. I'm a senior staff attorney at the Center for Justice and Accountability as well.
So, Joanna, you just mentioned a little bit about what Everlaw for Good is, but could you expand a little bit on what the program is about and why it exists?
Absolutely. So the mission of Everlaw as a company is to promote justice by illuminating truth. And we recognize that justice as a foundational element of our society is only possible when both sides of a case or of the judicial system are standing on equal footing. We also recognize that resources determine the equality of whether each side is able to stand on equal footing, and that the legal system is not always a level playing field. And so one of the things that we try to help level that playing field is to provide resources and access to organizations that are sort of structurally less well-resourced in the legal system. So those are nonprofit organizations that aren't able to be driven by market forces, pro bono practices that take on matters that, don't have the ability to provide financial gain to the firms, and then some non-legal use cases like investigative journalists who can benefit from our platform and sort of form the fourth estate of our civil society and educators, both legal clinics and law courses, to provide them access to get to know and use the most modern e-discovery software in the market.
So does that provide access to the software? Do you also provide support services in terms of helping people understand how to use the product or make best use of the product?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Everlaw is meant to be an intuitive and easy to use platform. And we provide our Everlaw for Good customers with the same services as any paying customer would get. So same level of support and training, which is unlimited seats, unlimited number of databases for as long as they need. And, basically the same, very same equal level. They're sort of equal citizens in the Everlaw community, and we really appreciate and value all of our Everlaw for Good customers for the great work that they do in this world.
Yeah. And you and I have talked before, but I think it's really cool that Everlaw does this, and that not only that they do it, but that they have a full-time person devoted to making it happen and to overseeing it. I know some other companies do have programs where they donate software, that kind of thing, to legal services organizations, but it's a little bit more of a sideline, I think. It's not so much of an actual focus of a full-time person. So that's really cool that you do that. So the Center for Justice and Accountability, as we're sitting here 15 minutes ago or something, you just won the Everlaw Summit Award as in the category of the Everlaw for Good programs, recognizing the work that you've done and the ways in which you've used this benefit. Which of you can kind of give me an introduction to what it is you do and what the work is that you do?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. So the Center for Justice and Accountability is a U.S.-based legal nonprofit organization. We've been around for more than 25 years. And over that time, the core of what we do is that we work with victims of atrocity crimes, typically that are committed outside the United States. And we work to both investigate those atrocity crimes, but also then represent them in legal cases here in the U.S., where there's a connection to the U.S. And typically, that's the presence of the perpetrator here in the U.S. So typical case, death squad leader under Pinochet leaves Chile after that country returns to a democratic government, settles in California, is living here unencumbered by his past. We work with victims' rights organizations in Chile to identify where he is and then bring a civil lawsuit on behalf of victims of some of the killings that he carried out. That civil lawsuit is an opportunity for truth-telling, to set the historical record straight, and also for accountability for that individual to not be able to just retire here in the U.S. And live a carefree life, but to have to answer for some of the crimes that he committed in Chile. And we bring these lawsuits in partnership with local actors, and the hope is that not only does it provide justice to the direct victims of the crimes, but that it also helps to pull forward accountability efforts in the home country, so that if we can develop evidence here in the case that we have in the U.S., we can also feed that to domestic legal processes in the home country, in this example, Chile, to try to move forward accountability efforts there as well.
So the scope of your work is global, but the focus is on U.S.-based litigation and individuals who are here in the U.S. Is that right?
That's the core of what we do. We also have other programs that are sort of capacity building or mentoring programs where we work with organizations that are based outside the U.S., where those organizations are trying to bring their own kinds of cases. So, for example, we work with a number of Syrian partners who are based in Europe, and those organizations are trying to bring kind of universal jurisdiction cases for atrocities committed in Syria. And so we'll work with those organizations to help sort of build up their internal capacity so they can then bring cases in Germany or France. And for those, we're not French or German lawyers, we're American lawyers, but we can bring some of our know-how into, how do you build a sort of command responsibility case? How do you build a sort of war crimes atrocity case? And we can work with those organizations so that they can bring their own cases and push forward accountability in their own country or where they happen to be. But yes, the core of what we do is the U.S. litigation. That's our know-how. That's what we can bring to the table.
Yeah, and I assume you're a nonprofit. How are you funded? How do you operate?
Well, we are a small nonprofit. We operate on limited resources. The funding that we get, particularly on the litigation side, is from foundations, individual donors. We also work with partners. So on the legal side, we work with large law firms that act as pro bono partners in our cases. So they come on board and we act as co-counsel in these cases. Those law firms also provide sometimes funding for us. And then particularly on the capacity building side, we sometimes have government grants that help to fund some of that work.
Claret, I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about kind of the nature of your legal team. How many people do you have on your team, and what's it look like? What's it composed of?
Yeah, actually, we're a very small but nimble team. I would say we're 4 staff attorneys. We usually have 2 legal fellows, so people who just finished law school last year and are there working with us for 1 year. And then, of course, every one of our cases has a pro bono partner. But the core of our work is done by a total of 4 staff attorneys, plus our executive director, who often gets, very involved in our work and used to be our legal director as well. So she's an amazing source of support when we need it. So we handle cases that have oftentimes are historical. They've happened 40, 30 years ago. And some of them have had initial attempts at investigations. And so there may be files for those investigations that are, thousands of pages long, and they're in Spanish or in Arabic or in and we have to manage all of that with our small team.
And in paper, probably too, right?
And in paper. We have digitized most of those documents, but I think the big challenge for us before Everlaw was to be able to do global searches of the entire universe of documents. Took an enormous amount of time because it required kind of artisanal work, let's call it that. Just having, first of all, the documents OCR processed automatically. I know this is something that many platforms offer, but there's no platform for NGOs and for nonprofits that provided that for us before we met Everlaw. And just being able to be part of the 21st century in a way was changed our ability to take on cases.
What I'm imagining, and I think this is what you're saying, is that a lot of your document work, it's not sort of traditional litigation document work, although you get to that eventually, but you're starting with investigating before you're even doing any litigation in these matters, and you're investigating cases that are, as you said, 40 years old or whatever, and from all over the world in all sorts of different languages. So that's really a unique set of document challenges, of discovery challenges from a legal perspective, right?
Absolutely. And one of the things about our work is that because of the nature of the crimes and the difficulty of securing witnesses and obtaining new evidence, we very often do in-depth investigations and feel we want to feel almost trial ready by the time we file. We don't count on discovery to provide us with new information, though we often acquire it. But our investigation period and work is much more in depth than it would be for a regular situation in U.S. litigation.
Yeah. How do cases come to you? I mean, how do you decide which cases to pursue? There's probably no shortage of...
So that's a two-part question that's really important to us. The way cases often come to us is because we form partnerships with organizations in countries where atrocities have been committed or are being committed, and they will refer people to us. Sometimes when our work is in the news, we suddenly get phone calls from people who say, "Oh, that happened to me too," or "Oh, I also saw my torturer in the street in the same city where I live in the United States." In fact, that's how we were founded. We were created initially from one of our founders was a psychologist who treated torture victims, and one of his clients said, "I saw my torturer in the grocery store." And that amazing coincidence turned out to be not that uncommon once he looked into it. So that's, serendipity is one way. Another is our deep relationships with organizations across the world. And the way we choose them, though, is that our cases have to be emblematic, meaning that we want them to have an impact for justice that goes beyond the specifics of this case. And so we always consult and coordinate with local partners who are in the place where the crime was committed, to see, well, does this advance the human rights agenda, the justice agenda, the anti-impunity agenda of your country? How does it help? Can we sometimes it takes a breakthrough case to open up the floodgates of prosecution. And so those are all things that are part of our work beyond the litigation. And when we pick a case, we want to make sure that it has that broader impact.
Yeah. Did you, Daniel, I don't know if you could talk to this. One of the things they mentioned in the citation for the award this morning was that you've made new law. Can you give me some examples of ways in which your organizations help make new law?
Yeah, there are some limited statutes in the United States that allow us to bring these civil claims for crimes that were committed outside the U.S. Most of the statutes on the books are concerned with crimes committed in the U.S. And around those statutes, there's issues such as immunity, political question doctrine, those sorts of things. So one, we've been at sort of CJA has been at the forefront of bringing cases under the Torture Victim Protection Act and the Alien Tort Statute. But then two, some of the common defenses that are used, such as immunity, CJA has very much been at the forefront of having U.S. courts understand the importance of these cases and cabining some of those defenses to the moments where they're actually needed and opening up the possibility of litigation here in the U.S. against perpetrators. So defendants can't just sort of wave the immunity flag and say, hey, look, I was a former government official. I did this within the course of my actions as the former Minister of Defense, so I should be covered by immunity. We've been able to sort of roll that back and bring cases in which courts, including the Supreme Court, have recognized that there is a role for the Torture Victim Protection Act, for the Alien Tort Statute to have here in the U.S. in pushing forward the important U.S. interests and not having the U.S. become a safe harbor for perpetrators of war crimes, genocide, atrocity crimes.
We're talking about the Everlaw for Good program, by which the e-discovery company makes its software available for free to legal aid providers, nonprofit organizations, and investigative journalists. Two of today's guests are lawyers at the Center for Justice Accountability, where access to Everlaw's software helps them in their pursuit of justice in human rights and atrocity cases. We'll get back to that conversation in a moment, but first, please take this opportunity to learn about the sponsors whose generosity supports this podcast. Your specialized law practice deserves specialized software. Meriscase is the legal practice management solution built exclusively for workers' compensation, employment and labor, and insurance defense firms. Meriscase delivers purpose-built features, including advanced document management, precision time tracking, automated billing, and integrated payment reconciliation. Ready to see what legal practice management software should be? Visit meriscase.com today. That's MERUS case.com. Welcome back to LawNext. As a reminder, we're very appreciative of the sponsors who support this podcast. You could be one of them. For a full media kit, email Ben Ambrogi, that's ben@lawnextmedia.com. As you've already heard in this interview, free access to discovery software through the Everlaw for Good program has been a major benefit to the lawyers at the Center for Justice and Accountability in their investigations of atrocity crimes. I wondered how the two programs connected in the first place, so as we return to the conversation, I asked CJS attorney Claret Vargas how her organization came to participate in Everlaw for Good. Let's pick up with her answer.
I think it was serendipity and good luck. In a way, we were actually looking for a platform that might assist us in doing our work, though we could not define exactly how it would work. And so, we talked to a number of people in the legal tech industry. We spoke to one person, and the specific work they did was not quite kind of a fit for what we did. And they said, oh, there's this place called Everlaw. You should look at the work they do. And it was exactly what we had been hoping for, which was really, we would like access to the resources that big law firms have, right?
Yeah.
Like we would like access to be able to review documents in the efficient way that a big law firm can. And I think, Everlaw is unique in that it provides that capacity. And as John said earlier, the clients who work with Everlaw for Good get access to the same platform and the same assistance and the same, mentorship as everybody else who pays for Everlaw. And that has made it has made a huge difference. It's even resulted in our law firm partners sometimes just using our platform, and because it allows us to give them, it allows us to kind of leapfrog bureaucratic issues and just create usernames for them while they're working on this particular case with us.
Yeah.
And it's been seamless for them.
Yeah. So you knew you needed something, and you started exploring what the options were, and that brought you there. And then how do you kind of evaluate people who come to you, or what's the process that you have in terms of looking at which programs to partner with?
Yeah. So I think CJA came to us back in 2019, maybe, a long time ago.
So before your time.
Yes, much before my time. The program's been around since 2017. We've supported more than 150 organizations in that time. In the past year, we have been really ramping up our strategy and our growth plan for the program. And so, I'll be honest, I think we had a set of evaluation criteria prior to the past year, but it was a little more subjective. We'd sort of take things case by case and evaluate, did they make sense? Over the past year, our leadership team has been extremely engaged and helpful in helping me and us collectively build out a strategic plan that included creating some really clear guidelines around what kinds of organizations and matters we'll support. So we have an evaluation committee, we take in applications, and we also reach out to organizations we think would be a good fit. And we evaluate them essentially on two areas. One is our Everlaw for Good program truly going to be effective and helpful for them based on structurally, are they an organization where they are more likely to be less well-resourced and to, where our support could help to level the playing field in the matters that they are taking on. And secondly, are they sort of a programmatic fit from a mission perspective? We try to make our program very inclusive. So we have 6 program categories, but they're very broad. There are things like low-income population, so legal aid organizations and folks who help people without resources, civil rights and liberties, human rights, public rights, and then environmental rights. So it's a very broad set of categories that can encompass a number of investigation and litigation matters that are all sort of in service of promoting access to justice.
Once you partnered with Everlaw back in 2019, if that's what it was, how did that help you? I mean, what difference did it make in the work that you're doing and the investigations you're conducting and the litigation you're doing? How does it work for you?
Yeah, I actually can remember the week when we started using Everlaw because we were in the midst of reviewing historical documents for a case that we have now filed, but we were working with spreadsheets trying to identify the places where certain witnesses or certain potential defendants were named. We were trying to identify among thousands of pages where a certain moment in a very long event, kind of a very messy situation that took place over the course of 2 days. And we were focused on a moment of about, 5 minutes. And trying to locate that meant reviewing by hand every document and also OCRing like each PDF independently and individually.
So the real needle in the haystack kind of situation.
And so the
about.
week we started with Everlaw, we just uploaded the entire universe of these documents, and we waited for an hour and a half, and then everything was OCR'd. So that, to begin with, was just an amazing moment of like, we can search this, right? The documents are not a very, very good quality. So like there's some like difficulties in reading, but in general, we were able to find and pinpoint where things were located. And then suddenly we were able to do global searches and proximity searches and, things that are, again, normal and that people know, but being able to actually use them for this number of pages, collating documents, just, again, I feel like I'm kind of gushing about being able to use like a typewriter, right? It's like these are very basic functions, but they're not functions that are easily accessible to under-resourced organizations. And so there's only so much we could do with the help of interns, volunteers, plucky like attorneys and very committed pro bono partners. But it's still, nothing except for Everlaw like turned up, 5-month project into a 2-week task.
Yeah.
And that was huge, and it still does that. Now we know that we are able to do this, so we can have the luxury of asking questions that we know would take months to answer if we were not using Everlaw. And now we are able to ask them, and therefore get a better understanding of extremely complex situations of human rights violations.
I saw an article on a blog post, I think, on the Everlaw site that talked about, I think, what you were just talking about, that first week where you said it was almost like a party. We could not believe how fast we could do these things. It sounds...
I mean, yes. And I remember also, like, by name, all the interns who were working on this with us, there was just like a collective sigh in the office back when we still had an office.
Yeah.
Talking to a lot of nonprofits that are coming onto Everlaw or evaluating new discovery, I'll ask them, well, what are you using for review or for discovery right now? And a lot of times the answer is Adobe, or
Right.
SharePoint, right? It's still very manual review for a lot of organizations because some of these technologies are just out of reach for many under-resourced organizations. But because of being under reach, CJA can't put an army of associates on review the way a big law firm or a major corporation can. And so the outsized impact that is possible for, when the access is provided is really inspiring to me to see.
Yeah. Daniel, are there any particular functions or features of the software that you found particularly useful in the work that you do?
Well, our work is sort of built around collaboration. So collaboration with local actors, collaboration with our law firm partners, collaboration internally. And as Clyde said, we have 4 attorneys, but then we have interns who come and go. We have fellows who come and go. And so having just the fact that there's a stable, permanent platform that allows us to both internally and then with the various different actors that we collaborate with kind of all share and all work in tandem together is hugely beneficial to our work. I can't tell you how many times pre-Everlaw we had systems where the law firm had its own version of the documents, the local actors had their own version, we had a version, and then my version when the new intern started to change and they didn't know where it was. But now sort of all of those documents and the tagging and the system of tagging that we've designed that is then shared across all of the various actors and can be modified very quickly. So new actor or, cut off the access to this actor, that sort of both permanency, but also flexibility is hugely beneficial to the work that we get.
Yeah. So the technology obviously saves you time, helps you do things more quickly. What does that extra time mean for you? I mean, do you do more cases? Do you spend more time on a particular case? How does that translate for you?
Yeah, a little bit of all the above. I think we're able to take on new matters because we know that time is being saved. I think we're able to do different things with the matters. So as Corey referenced, a number of our cases, because they're typically atrocity crimes that are committed outside the U.S., a lot of the source documentation is in a different language. And so, it used to be that we could only really work on particular countries if we had internal language capabilities where we could, Arabic, Spanish, etc.
Right.
But now the sort of translation features that are built in within the platform, yes, it's always good to have, those language capabilities in-house. But, I don't speak Spanish, but I work with Clarette on a number of our Latin American cases. But I'm now able to not have to just ask Clarette to do all the translation, but be able to look at it directly in a sort of, in the English version of it. And at least it gives me a baseline understanding. And the same for, our interns and our fellows and the like.
Yeah. Do you add anything to that or?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think, for example, preparing for depositions, it basically has created a new way of working collaboratively for depositions, for example, in terms of the story builder feature, where we are kind of creating a chronology as we are reviewing our documents, and then kind of assigning them to the specific person that we intend to depose. And then also just, when the lawyer responsible for taking that deposition begins to prepare, all the documents are there. My notes on each of those documents are already there. Again, things that are that should be kind of commonplace and should happen all the time. But when you add up 1 minute here, 30 seconds there between looking from one platform to the other or sending an email saying, hey, this document doesn't have your notes, when that happens hundreds of times, it adds up to a lot of time. So again, it is a little bit of, it changes in saving you time, but it also changes in the way you approach the project. Like you can feel confident that you can draft an outline for a deposition that someone else is going to take and be sure that we don't have paralegals, right? So be sure that all of the relevant documents are already included in that outline without me necessarily having to assign to somebody the job of collecting those and having them ready for the partner who may take the
Have you used any of the generative AI features that have been in beta over the last year?
We are really, really interested in doing that. We still have to have the go-ahead internally. I'm excited for that. We were just talking about what we will do once we're able to do that, because things like there might be, for example, parallel cases in country that are going on at the same time as we are litigating a case here. So there might be a prosecution of somebody else for the same crime because it was a kind of something committed by multiple members of a military force. While we are doing a litigation here, there may be a decision in country that's in Spanish. And now, instead of having me or somebody else who speaks Spanish summarize that for the team, we can have Everlaw translate and then hopefully provide a summary of what the court ruled. And we can ask specific questions like, what did it rule about this particular part of the crime or this particular event, even if, some of these decisions are hundreds of pages long. And so that's one thing I'm thinking would be fantastic. And also, as the case law develops, the Torture Victim Protection Act, new cases, for example, when the Alien Tort Statute was getting narrower and narrower over the years, we really had to just be updated. And it's not a field in which you can just get a CLE and get an update on what's new, right? So just collecting the case law and getting summaries on that, or just preparing, as I said, for a deposition and talking about, summarize what these 6 pieces of evidence say. We'll check it, and we plan. Our expectation is never that AI would do the work for us, but it'll really allow us to focus our time on working on the things that require our expertise.
Yeah. Is there a particular case from the recent case files that you've worked on where this tool has really, where you can sort of illustrate how this tool has really helped you and made a difference in the case?
Yeah, I think the Palace of Justice case is the one we've been working on. So this is a case in 1985. Well, it's an ongoing case. So I'll just tell you what's known publicly. In 1985, there was in Colombia, an M19 guerrillas took over the Palace of Justice, which is where the Supreme Court is housed, and they took hostages. And the military rightfully tried to rescue the hostages. What was unknown at that time was that even as they were doing very laudable and lawful actions of rescuing hostages, there was also a parallel underground system of picking out people who were suspicious for whatever reason and running them through what was called the especiales, or the special kind of system where they had secondary interrogations, torture, extrajudicial executions, and enforced disappearances. And so the way the Everlaw assisted us is this was a 2-day operation with hundreds of witnesses, hundreds of survivors, hundreds of victims. We are focused on the specific death of one magistrate whose daughters we represent. And I think that the amount of time it would have taken us to review that would have been much greater. There are multiple cases that happened in Colombia, not about this particular magistrate, but other people. There's a large body of documents, translations to kind of understand just the general universe of what should we be focusing on, identifying witnesses, identifying specific moments in the chronology of what happened. All these things, yes, we would have done them, but it would have taken us a lot longer, and we may not have found all the bits that we did because of Everlaw.
Yeah, that's great. I think we're getting near the end of our time, but Joanne, was there anything else that you kind of wanted to close us out with in terms of thoughts about this program and the work that you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, because we're at Everlaw Summit 24, I would be remiss not to talk a little bit more about our generative AI feature suite that we, just announced to general availability and are starting to offer to all of our customers. And we're also offering a free tranche of credits for our Everlaw for Good customers. When I talk to industry experts who I know you've talked to in the access to justice space, there's sort of a lot of optimism and also a lot of fear. There's this sort of unanswered question of, is generative AI going to help widen the justice gap? Because it is an expensive technology, and are those resources only going to be going to and utilized by the folks with the deepest pockets? Or does it have the potential to narrow the justice gap by being offered to organizations that have fewer resources and being able to speed up their processes and make them so much more efficient and effective? We obviously, based on the mission of the company and the program that we run, want to do what we can to sort of push in the direction of generative AI helping to narrow the justice gap. And so that's why we're offering our Everlaw for Good customers these tools free of charge, and would encourage other legal tech companies to do the same and really sort of pay attention to this broader sort of zeitgeist in the movement and provide, free and heavy access to these generative AI tools to the organizations that need them the most.
Hear to that. I agree. Well, thank you all for taking the time to talk with me. And Clarette and Daniel, thank you for this very important work that you do. And Joanne, thank you for this program that helps support this kind of work. Pleasure to speak with all of you.
Thank you, Abs.
Congratulations to the Center for Justice and Accountability for its important work in seeking justice for atrocity crimes, and for its Everlaw for Good award in recognition of that work. And kudos to Everlaw for maintaining this program and making its software available for free to legal aid and nonprofit organizations. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you'd like to share your own thoughts or comments, please do so by messaging me on LinkedIn or on X, or you can find me now on Blue Sky as well, or just email me directly, ambrogi@gmail.com. And if you're a fan of LawNext, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. LawNext is a production of LawNext Media. I'm your host, Bob Ambrogi. I hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of LawNext.